Well, I want to welcome all of you to another episode of The Conversation, which is my opportunity to speak to interesting people in our community about their experience in this coronavirus, but also how they see the world emerging after the coronavirus. Today, my guest, lovely Mayor Warren, doesn't need a lot of introduction to us. She has been our mayor now for 6 years, or she's in her 6th year. But before that, she served on the city council for 6 or 7 years, 3 years as its president. So she's been in leadership in Rochester for many years, although she is still very young. Many of you probably know she was our youngest city council president and our youngest mayor. So it's an honor to be with here today. She's educated. Some of you may know. I think it was New York City, right? John Jay, is that where you went to college?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And then Albany Law. So really, you've spent your whole life. She spent her whole life really in New York State. But I'm most excited as our mayor and as this conversation that you know the city that you have led very well. You were raised in Rochester. You were educated in Rochester, and so you know this city well. So it's an honor to be with you here. Thanks for giving us some time.
Thank you, Pastor Rob, and thank you for your prayers. I definitely appreciate it, not just during this time, but ever since I've known you, you have always extended the helping hand and the hand of grace, and so I definitely appreciate that, and the Browncroft Community Church for all that you do in our community.
Oh, thank you so much. We're grateful to have a small part in doing whatever we can for this great city that I love too. I suppose I want to ask you this. You said a little of this before we started, but I don't want to dive in without asking just how you're doing, how you and your husband are doing, your daughter. How's life in the coronavirus for your family?
Life is great. We've adjusted well, and I thank God that my daughter's school, she's in the 4th grade, they were able to really adjust to online school really quickly. She attends North Star Christian, and they were up and running really fast for her, and so being able to connect with her classmates has made it a lot easier. Her teacher has been dynamite with not only providing the information, but also doing different seminars with them. And so she hasn't missed a beat. I think that the cold weather has helped out a lot because, the
Right.
wanting to go out a lot has stopped. But we still take her out to ride her bike and things like that. As it pertains to the daily work of the mayor's office, we still, I still go into the office. My husband is an essential worker, so we're in and out, doing what we can to make sure we stay safe and keep our family safe. The hardest part is being apart from our family.
Right.
Meaning my mom, I'm used to seeing her at least, once or twice a week. And, I have to drive by and wave to her, drop off groceries. And, really just seeing the toll that it's taken on families across our community, and including my family. My sister lost several people to the coronavirus. My uncle
Wow.
passed away in New York City to the virus. And so, when you look at the totality of what's happening, we have our challenges, but thankful that we're able to do what's necessary on behalf of those that we love and care about.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that or didn't read that you had personal members of your family. I'm very sorry to hear that. You have my condolences for that. And I would imagine if you're like everyone else, that you guys weren't allowed to do very much after the fact.
Correct. My uncle was actually differently abled, and he lived in New York City. My grandmother is 91 this year. And, so it's very hard for her because she's also suffering from dementia and, not being able to hold her son's hand and not being able to get the body because things are really different down in New York City than they are here. For us, it was just a matter of, as a family, praying, coming together, understanding that, if we're people of faith, we believe that he's gone on to a different place and gone on to be with the Lord. And we have to lean on that understanding and not on our own understanding. And so, the challenges that my sister's friends and all of them down in DC is really impacting a lot of the people that she knows more so than than anything else. And so it's very difficult to comfort her during this time because can't go to funerals, can't do any of that except for really console your friends over the phone.
Well, that's very tough. Well, let me dive in, Mayor, and ask you maybe a philosophical question to begin with. A lot of people were talking to me about not only what they're thinking about the coronavirus, but what comes next. And in your opinion, as the mayor of Rochester, would you say that what we're doing right now, no one knows the answer to this, but do you think this is an episode to be endured? We will bounce back, or is this something more than that? Is this maybe a transformational moment in the way we do life and the way we experience our culture and our society?
I think that it's a transformational moment in the way we experience life. And I think that it is transformational because we are going to have to operate a lot differently than we have in the past. And when I say that, it is because the things that we cherished, and we talked about this, Pastor Rob, before we started, where the things that we lauded and applauded, meaning sports and music and all those different entertainment, I think a lot of things that we praised, in a matter of days was just completely shut down. Money, all those things, and we had to sort of retreat. And it has us all taking a step back and looking at, okay, what's most important? Am I right with God? Am I in a place that I need to be? Have I really been focusing on my family the way that I need to focus on my family? And we all had to, go in and really take an introspective look. And so I think that when this is all over and done with, life will be different. And we will operate differently because we do not know when this virus, when we'll have, say, not necessarily a cure, but a vaccine for the virus, how long it's going to be around. And so those transformational moments where we have to really look at how we do business and what's most important is happening. And but I do believe that we'll come out better and stronger on the other side because we now understand that we're not in control. And I think that that's the most important part about this. You think that you're in control, but in a matter of days, everything changed for everyone at the same time.
I appreciate you saying that, and it leads to my second question. And I know you, Mayor, have a personal faith, a long-lasting, long-time faith in your life. How has that helped you or encouraged you or influenced your decisions as mayor responding to this crisis?
So my faith has, I believe, kept me grounded, right? So when you want to pull out your hair and just go outside and start screaming and running down the street because things are falling, every day there's something that's different that's coming and you're trying to respond. For me, I lean back on my faith and understand that God is the one that is in control, and I believe that He has called me to serve for such a time as this. And if we truly understand, and for me, understanding my and leaning on that faith is to trust Him, to trust that the things that He has outlined in the Bible, He's always brought His people through. Have there been challenges? Absolutely. Tough challenges, loss of life, plagues and other things, but floods, but He's always brought His people through. And I think that in and of itself, He sacrificed His only Son so that we may live. And so I can't think that He won't do the same here. It may seem, because we're in the middle of it, that there is, that people can look at it and say, oh, well, there's no hope. But actually that is the hope, that when you read every situation, every challenge that, came before. It was that he had made sure that we came out stronger and better because of it. You look at what's happening even with the atmosphere the fact that the earth in and of itself is replenishing itself. The air is getting cleaner, the water and all those things.
Yeah.
It is, you look at it and say that this cannot just happen for no reason. Somebody's in control of this, and that has to be God. When you look across the spectrum of everything that's happening, and for it to be happening globally, it's not just happening in one particular spot. Where no matter where you live at in the world, we're in the same position in having to take those necessary steps, not only just to protect ourselves and our family, but also to protect the earth.
And what's been your most surprising difficulty that you've experienced?
I would have to say that the time that we're in right now is probably the most challenging because it impacts every aspect of our lives, right? So when you think about the education of our children, you can identify and see the digital divide. You can see that, some families and children, their schools were able to adjust and on a fly, and the children had really no loss of learning. When you think about the economy at this point in time for restaurants, businesses, all retail, all to be shut down and closed, and not to know rather they're going to be coming back. I think about our employees that are currently working from home, and many of them on the front lines, our police officers, our firefighters, nurses, doctors, and the impact that this virus has had on their lives and in their daily work, and how we deliver those services and a change in delivering those services that we've had. To be in a leadership position and really have to make decisions right now. We're in a current process of looking at our budget. We're on a July 1st, June 30th budget cycle. So, we're in the middle of a crisis trying to figure out, knowing that we only fund our city basically through 3 operations, and that's, the money that we get from the state. In the state, of course, you've heard the governor talk about the fact that there are billions of dollars in the hole. Sales tax, because everything is shut down, people are uncertain, they're not spending money. And then property tax and the impacts that, for the city, we are mandated by law to provide $119.1 million to the school district, which is 68% of the taxes that we collect. And so this crisis across the board has turned into a health crisis that's turned into a fiscal crisis that we are going to have to manage and make sure that we continue to provide the exceptional service, because at the end of the day, people, when they call the police department, they want to know that someone's going to show up. When they call the fire department, when they put their trash out, they're going to, so this probably, this for me is the most challenging moment in time for leaders. But I can assure you that one thing that gives me hope and gives me pause is that every level of government and, our business community, our faith community have really stepped up to really work together to say, this is not going to, our challenges will not define us. We're going to pray for our leaders. We're going to pray to come out of this. Our leaders are, our government, from the county to the state to even the federal government, working together to provide for the people on the ground, and then continue to do the work on behalf of the people that we represent.
I wonder how your personal story has shaped your professional life. How has what your those influences that you've had, even the experiences that you've had, have shaped your convictions and your values? And I would imagine some people even say, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say this about you, but your ambition.
Across the board, my grandfather and my grandparents on my mom's side have been a driving force in letting me know, and our entire family, my cousins and I, that we could accomplish and achieve anything that we put our mind to, that there will be no limitations on our success except for the ones that we put on it. but it was always grounded in faith. My grandfather was an elder in the church. I was born and raised in the church, and so therefore, he always, I don't know how many people know this, but my grandfather couldn't read, so but he knew the Bible like the back of his hand. If he told you to go to Philippians or to Joshua 1:9 and you were not quoting the right scripture, he would know and say, that's not what it says. And so we would always think that was like a miracle. Like, Granddad, you can't read this. Like, how do you know that we're in the wrong place? And but he just knew. I don't talk about this part of his story that often, but when my grandfather, in 1984, he was working as a security guard at Wegmans, and he was shot, and he was shot 4 times, and they actually pronounced him dead in the hospital room. And my aunt was a ICU nurse at the same hospital, and so she said to the doctor, like, look, you have to keep working on him. You cannot, go out here and tell this family that he's gone. And so, Dr. Nada Rogers, who is still, I think he's still practicing now, he saved my grandfather's life. But also, my grandfather, when he came out, when he woke up with the tubes and all of that in the hospital, he took out all of the tubes and, stood up in the bed after surgery, and my grandmother and my uncles was in the room, and they're like, what are you doing? Like, no, you need that. And he said, no, I don't. He said, God said my work on earth isn't done yet. And so and my grandmother, of course, my uncles don't understand it, and they think like, okay, he's delirious, right?
Right.
Even though but he literally they took all of the tubes, took everything out of him within, I believe, 2 weeks, or less than 2 weeks, with all 4 bullets in him. He came out of the hospital.
Wow.
And he lived for almost another, 30 years.
Wow.
And so that, I was in the 2nd grade, and he never really was able to articulate or tell us, because it was so, it was such an emotional experience for him. When I asked him a couple of times, tell me what it was like. Tell me what you saw. Tell me. And he would start, he said, I cannot tell you exactly what happened, or, and he would start to tear up, and he couldn't say, but he just said, I just know, he said, I know what he told me. He said, your work on earth isn't done. And so for me, that, knowing my grandfather's story, knowing that he had came back and lived a full life, and the fact that it was always grounded on faith, and not that they didn't have struggles. They came from as sharecroppers from King Street, South Carolina, but never really allowed those challenges to define who they were, and always, really instilled in us that, in the end, your faith and your commitment to family, and making sure that you do the right thing, even when you have to stand by yourself. You stand on what you believe is the right principle, and that for me is what gets me through the day.
That's a great story. I know I think, if I'm right, he died right after you were inaugurated. Is that right? Or am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So he had a massive stroke on December 23rd, 2013. And I had prayed to God, and I said, listen, he's come this far to see me actually be elected mayor. Please allow him the time to actually see me sworn in.
Wow.
And we had a swearing-in ceremony at the hospital. I'm thankful to Strong for allowing us to do that at the hospital on January 1st, 2014, and he died on January 2nd.
Wow. Unbelievable. What's the most important characteristic of a leader to be a successful leader?
I would have to say, be willing to listen. I can say I learned this over time. When I first became mayor, I felt like I had a lot to prove, right? Because many people didn't believe that they believed that it was a fluke that I won, right? So I felt like, okay, well, I have a lot to prove here. And I didn't in the beginning really listen to advice, or I listened to the wrong advice, I should say. I would say surround yourself with strong people that are willing to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
and to challenge you to be better, to not lead with emotion, to lead with facts, to lead with the data. It took me having to take some really hard hits, and as people say, learn from my experience. Right? Like, I can tell people, learn from my experience. You don't have to go through the same things that I went through. And I would say that first year of being mayor was the toughest year for me. Made me stronger, but it also taught me to understand that I'm not in this position to prove things to people. I'm in this position to serve.
Yeah.
And being willing to serve, meaning and understanding what service is like, must first mean that you have to be willing to listen.
Right.
And to hear the tough things that people have to say, and then make the decision based on the information and the facts, and not based on feelings. And I think that was so very, very important for me, starting off and learning from the challenges and the mistakes that I think that I made. That for me, and I think for any young person coming into the position, you do not have to be the smartest person in the room. You have to surround yourself with the smartest people.
Wow.
But ultimately, you make the decision. You have your folks do the research. You have them tell you the information, and then you make the decision based on what you've learned. And if you are surrounded by the right people, those decisions will be the best decisions that you make.
Well, I want to let you go, Mayor, but I want to give you the last word. How can we help you, encourage you, or be good citizens in the city for such a time as this?
Well, thank you, Pastor Rob, for inviting me to be a part of the conversation. I love the title, having a conversation about not only our challenges, but our opportunities. For everyone that's listening, I want to not only just encourage you, but let you know that we're all in this together, that we may be experiencing different levels of this particular virus, given our socioeconomic status, our race, and other things. But at the end of the day, we are all in this together. I would say to people, don't be afraid to challenge those people that are within your circle. Too many times we allow for certain comments to be made, certain things to be said, and we don't challenge it. We don't challenge them on their frame of reference and why you see it that way. I would ask the question and have people ask the question as to why. Why do you see that situation in that particular way? And then I will also, have people not be afraid to talk about and have the tough discussions that challenge our own understanding of certain things, our own frame of reference. Where did this come from? And examine those things within your own circle. I'll leave with a story. When I was in law school, there was a situation that happened where one of my good friends was an Italian woman, and I was president of the Black Law Students Association, and there was a situation that happened on campus, and her and I, she didn't understand where I was coming from. I didn't understand where she was coming from, but you know what? We went for a walk, and I was able to tell her my experiences, my life experiences, and she was able to share hers. And in the end, we were able to see both sides and come out even stronger and better as friends because of it. But if I walked away and said, you know what, since you have that opinion, I don't care, and I'm not talking to you about it, and go away, and she did the same, neither one of us would have been able to understand each other's frame of reference.
Right.
And I think that it's so very, very important to get to know people, not just to understand or to have our own opinions based on what we hear from other folks, but to learn for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we can only do that by challenging each other to be better, to be stronger, to be wiser. And I think that that's part of what we need to do as not only Christians, but to show compassion. And I think that this is what Christ wants us to do, and what our
Amen.
faith wants us to do is to understand one another, because we're all in this together. We're a part of the human race.
Well, it's interesting. You said what you're saying here in that story is back to what you said at the beginning of this time together, was what you learned in your first year was to listen, and is one of the great, most important lessons that you learned in being a leader. And I forget, it was Stephen Covey, whoever said, seek to understand and then to be understood. And that is so critical. And I hope and pray that's one of the outcomes of this experience that we're all going through in every community, but in the city of Rochester.
Amen.